So we're going to be talking about biopharma opportunities today, and it's going to come in two broad flavors, two very active areas. One really focuses on the medicines that help us, and the other will focus on one tool. One of our panelists, John, is working on a very innovative delivery mechanism, which I think is going to bring some terrific benefits to people. At least I pray it does. So overall, just to set the scene, biopharma is about, I'd say about $1/3 trillion. And there's a ton of activity and a ton of risk. And I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we're going to start talking about how we can kind of capture this risk and turn it into some return. So I'm going to start, John, with you, please.
Good afternoon, Jay. Thank you for having me join your panel here. And Marty, thanks for reaching out. So my name's John Maroney, and I am serving as the CEO and a director for a company called Alessa Therapeutics, which is focused on local drug delivery for solid organ tumors. Our lead program is in prostate cancer, and we have other follow-on programs in benign prostatic hyperplasia and breast cancer. The company was founded by Dr. Pamela Munster, who's a research oncologist at UC San Francisco. Her focus is primarily breast cancer, and she runs the phase 1 research unit there. She's also a breast cancer survivor and conceived of this idea of local delivery in the course of her personal journey through cancer. So our idea is to develop an implantable system that passively delivers drug locally to the tumor and interfere with the cancer's ability to replicate without systemic dosing of the patient. So we're in clinical stage. We're running a phase 1 study in Australia and New Zealand, and we're starting a collaborative study with the National Cancer Institute here in the US, and that'll be enrolling our first patient tomorrow, I believe. My background has been med tech for the last 40 years. Prior to Alessa Therapeutics, I was CEO of a company called Foresight Vision 5, which was drug delivery to the eyes. We eventually sold that to Allergan. And prior to that, I was a venture, partner and managing member of Delphi Ventures. I was a partner across 3 funds over the course of 10 years. We had about $1 billion under management. But my joy is working with young startup companies that are developing new technologies. So I'm also on the board of Radiant Oximetry, which is looking at fetal oxygen saturation in labor and delivery, non-invasively, and a company called Aleo Medical, which is focused on multi-parameter blood chemistry for patients that are in dialysis. So that's a wireless wearable. So that's my introduction, Jay. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. And now we have 2 VCs. Karl, you want to tell us a little bit about what you're working on?
Sure, thank you, Jay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So I'm a venture capitalist. I invest in early stage Series A therapeutics, medicines, and synthetic biology. And I invest in teams that are trying to solve the hardest problems in human and planetary health. And paradoxically, by going after the hardest problems, when you crack those problems, I have a very low loss rate. So out of my 28 last investments, 24, only 2 are total wipeouts, and only 2 were exited below cost. And I've got
our attention.
Yeah, and I've got wins where I have an exit where I exited with counting milestones that we received was over 35x, and the deal was signed with the pharma company within 14 months of the Series A. I engage before the Series A. I like to get involved in company formation, but I only participate as an investor, and maybe we'll touch on it later. Why do I wait to be part of the Series A than like oink up and try to own more at the seed stage? So thanks, Jay. It's great. Oh, it's great. And this is an original piece of art, but unlike one of our previous panelists, David Liu, I didn't do that.
David, please tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Good. Thanks so much, Jay. And thank you, Marty. Thanks. I'm really honored to be alongside John and Karl. And Karl, what an impressive track record. We'll have to learn a lot from you. So I have about over 25 years of buy and sell side expertise in mergers, acquisitions, partnering, investments in life sciences and healthcare. I've worked within strategic biopharmas, private equity, investment banking, and now venture capital. I'm currently the managing general partner of Coast BioVentures. We're an emerging life science focused fund, investing somewhat like Karl, certainly on the early stage, but we'll also look at the late stage. In parallel to this venture, I'm also a venture partner in Suncoast Venture Partners in San Diego, and also a limited partner with Mesa Verde Venture Partners. These are two life science funds focused on incubator through early growth stage companies. Prior to that, this leadership in VC, I've been an investment banker and M&A specialist within private equity and also within corporate development within various strategic pharmaceutical companies such as Allergan. I currently serve on a couple boards with Histogen and Phoenix Molecular Designs, also on the board of directors for California Life Sciences and chairman for Biocom California's Capital Development Initiative. By way of education, I have a strong background in sciences with a PhD in biophysics and a master's in oncology. I also have an MBA with a finance concentration to round out what I feel is a great combination to have in venture. So thank you very much.
Yeah, that's terrific. Let's keep the drum roll going. What do you see are the key trends that are going to influence the interesting opportunities in 2022? David?
Thanks so much for the question. I think there's a number of things that I'll touch on, and I'm sure that John and Karl will expand on it. There's just a vast amount of private and public capital out in the market, strong balance sheets from strategic biopharma companies. So this very large dry powder, has to be deployed. Venture healthcare fundraising in the U.S. is likely to hit this year somewhere around 16 billion, and investments in the U.S. and Europe are likely to be around 64 billion. So there's just a ton of cash out there. I also think that when you start looking at the exponential growth of innovative technology trying to solve unmet medical and clinical needs, it's truly exponential. We saw that following the efficacy of the messenger RNA vaccines for COVID. This has only spurred on a lot of innovation. I think we're going to see likely a surge of such therapies and innovation moving forward. And I think it's that venture funding in this area is only going to fuel growth. And then maybe one more area, I don't want to, because I came up with about 8, but another one for me is pricing and reimbursement. You're seeing this as a very big issue with a number of therapies. Look what's happening to Biogen and its stock because of Aduhelm and the Medicare mess that they've created. In today's market, it's not only important to get a drug safe and efficacious, but there's also 2 other legs to that stool: is at what price and who's going to pay for it. And so those are the things that are I think are important elements to think about in terms of investing.
Yeah, thank you. Karl, I know you have some perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to build on David's point about the speed and pace of technology. It's way beyond anything we've seen in information technology. So, people are familiar with Moore's Law and all that stuff. That's like a rounding error to how fast things are happening. And part of that is because, I live in San Francisco. There's lots of startups here. It's a great environment for startups. But a really cool paper was just published, and there's a way to make these reagents so that other people can use this technology in the academic community. It's already been distributed to 5,000 laboratories, not scientists. So this is, and maybe if we have more time towards the end, I can talk about, maybe give a physical example of how dramatic this technology is. The second thing is talent. Back when I got started, There were a few people that moved from pharma into biotechnology, and the technology wasn't that powerful, and we had to figure it out and make it up. And now we have the ability to invest in serial entrepreneurs. And also, the first-time entrepreneurs, I've invested in people who come from academics, who become founders, who become CEOs. They have other people they can talk to and really accelerate all that super fast. The third thing is business development. So pharma has a ton of money and they want to in-license half of their pipeline, even at the earliest stage. And that's my preferred exit. I've had 4 companies exit that way in less than 18 months. And the last point is the speed of how all this is happening, because there's been a reconfiguration of our entire industry. It got accelerated by COVID, but pharma outsources to expert groups, and it's the only way I can describe it. It's kind of like when the internet, originally you had to build your own server farm, and now you just access stuff, and it makes everything go faster, cheaper, more capital efficient. That's happening in biotech in a very good way. Notice I didn't say anything about the flood of money coming in. That's the least significant of all these trends.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So I'd be remiss if I didn't pick up on David and Karl, what you said about COVID, essentially. There's a tidal wave, right, of development that thankfully is going against trying to, tackle what we're up against. What impact is that having? Has that made it more difficult to get certain things done? Have regulators not been as able to kind of vote on, certain development? What are we likely to see as this tidal wave, to your point, Karl, kind of evens out, as it probably will? John, any perspective on that?
From my perspective, the regulatory folks have been quite responsive. We have an IND open in the US, we've got ethics approval in Australia, and those folks didn't meet a beat. What impacted our ability to move forward was enrollment of patients when, the hospital staff effectively had to go home and research associates couldn't go and treat patients. The patients didn't want to come back for follow-ups. That was a problem. And we're pulling through that now. With the vaccines across the board, we're seeing a much better patient enrollment. But I think the regulatory agencies have been incredibly responsive. And I think, looking to where the new ideas are coming from, I'm involved with the Stanford Biodesign Program and UC San Francisco and UC Davis. And these folks are really looking carefully at where the unmet needs are in medicine, in the hospitals, and they're coming forward with tremendously well thought out programs. And so I think that that's another interesting place for deal flow and to see what's cooking, what's new.
Yeah, we're going to focus a little bit on where to look for deal flow and more perspective on that. I want to kind of level set this. Biopharma investing is different than other kinds of investing.
Yeah.
And particularly for a family office and perhaps even more so for small and medium-sized family offices. David, help us understand some of the differences between this and what some people might call kind of kissing cousin sectors like tech. How is this different?
That's a great metaphor. Venture capital investment in this area offers the opportunity certainly for significant gains, but these investments also involve a high degree of business and financial risk, and frankly can result in substantial losses of your investment. Among these risks are certainly general risks involved with investing in companies at an early stage of development, where Karl and I love to put our money. They generally have little or no operating history. Some of them are CEOs and it's their first time to the rodeo. Companies operating at a loss or a substantial variation in operating results from period to period. This is very, very common, and frankly, these companies need a boatload of cash. It's capitally intensive, so substantial capital to support either development or expansion to essentially achieve or maintain a competitive position. And there's a lot of competition in a number of these areas, and particularly in a lot of the therapeutic areas that biopharma is developing. And, in some of these cases, you have competition from companies with greater financial resources, more extensive development and experience, marketing, service capabilities. And frankly, we talked about talent, just greater managerial and technical personnel. So early stage companies often experience unexpected problems in the area of product development. If you look at starting a drug today in discovery, there's a 90% failure rate. So only 10% actually make it, and a lot of drugs get through clinical trials. Very few actually make it. So the risk of investing in early stage companies in biopharma or life science is much greater than is customarily associated with investment in not only larger, more established companies and ventures, but also in other sectors.
That's great. Karl, your perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, Mark Andreessen, the famous internet investor, he worries about the deals he didn't do. And the differences in tech, the fundamental technologies, like computers work, everything works. And I like to invest in the very earliest stage, sometimes just at the concept stage. And you might be, every single one of the successful companies I've been involved with, they figure out early that the early technology, the best way they can apply it doesn't work, and they have to reinvent it. And that's why you need a certain type of talent and a certain type of investor that understands and believes and understands. And it's not that it's patient capital. They get to these no answers. So in a big company, they would go into this technology, and it's a no-go decision, and you hit the no-go. And this is why at the earliest stages, when they come in and they talk to our startups that are successful, they're amazed that we were able to do this. Because first of all, they didn't think it would work in the first place. And then we've had to reinvent the technology. So it's a totally unique solution that has a tremendous upside if it works, and they're willing to take the risk. So you're not relying on the hype part of the cycle by investing early. You're relying on the ability to iterate.
Okay, that's
point.
really interesting.
I mean, how do you pick a winner? It's like watching a little league game and trying to figure out which of the players is going to go on to a pro career. The cut is really steep, and you can fall out for any number of reasons. I mean, we talked about clinical risk, regulatory risk, and the team that executes it. And so for a family office investor, I think it's key to partner with folks like Karl and David, and let's make sure we're following a lead that gets us into the right deals.
Yeah. I want to kind of pick up on what I sense may be a little bit of a shifting of alignments. And David, you may have a perspective on this. So how are in this space VCs, family offices, and private equity kind of playing and, kind of putting your crystal ball on it? How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, I see more collaboration going on. These non-traditional investors like corporate venture capital and family offices playing a bigger and bigger role in investments. Now, the non-traditional investors are not leading, but they're certainly, co-investing, and they're being a part of the syndicate. So I see greater and greater collaboration. They're not going to be the ones who are going to be leading the diligence, for example. They're going to rely upon people who have that deep domain expertise and experience in investing in the space. But they are playing a bigger and bigger role, which is very, very exciting. So that's really on the VC and family office, and then the corporate venture side. Private equity is a different animal. As you know, private equity, I call them professional buyers. They like, cash flow businesses, predictability. That is sort of an oxymoron to biopharma, the early stage. So you generally don't see PE investors coming into the biopharma space unless they're getting close to break even or are EBITDA positive. But it's really more on the VC and family office side. But just overall, as an investment and investment classes, you're seeing more and more collaboration.
Yeah. Thanks. So let's start working the body of this so that we get kind of more than our fair share of return and give up a little bit of the risk on this. Karl, how do you source the deals? How do family offices get kind of access to rich deal flow in this space?
Yeah, so I doubt that any family office will source deals the way I do because it's extremely inefficient. But I look because I get involved with incubators and all sorts of. I mean, I have a reputation for being able to really build efficient, fast. So I love talking to entrepreneurs, and I'm not going to charge them anything, and I'll tell them what I think, and so that helps me build out my network so that people come to me with ideas that match up with the things that they heard I was interested in. I think the one way for family offices to build deal flow is if you have a long-term commitment to the sector, whether it's the Pagliuca family or Lida Hill. She's started Pegasus Park, and I'm going to be a venture capitalist in residence again for free. I'll just go down there, and I want to, and also UT Southwestern's there. It's a great new area for startups and for technology. Or like Reed Jobs, he started Emerson Collective. He brought together. Unfortunately, I canceled. We had the most amazing seminar set up that was going to be up in Napa. So I think that if you have that kind of long-term commitment, or if you can hire someone internal to curate where you're going to make those investments, I think if not, I think a good way to get involved is, become a LP in a fund and learn about it that way.
David?
Not that I'm fundraising.
Yeah, gotcha. David, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think in terms of where I'm getting a lot of, sourcing of deals, and I think where family offices should certainly take away some key takeaways, certainly partner with guys like Karl and I. But, I get a lot of my deal flow from my strong referral networks within law firms, M&A and corporate attorneys, IP attorneys. They're the ones who are doing a lot of the triage, if you will. So you have an entrepreneur coming to him on the IP or putting together, formation docs, what have you. They're asking, hey, do you know anyone where I can go to help raise money? Whether that's on the debt or on the equity side. So financial advisors is another one. That was a big one for me as an investment banker, where a lot of my M&A came from. Financial advisors, incubators, as Karl has mentioned, academic institutions that are producing great IP and technology, and they need to find a home for it. So I do a lot of cultivating in that space. And then, frankly, just having strong networks within the life science and healthcare spaces that I've had over, more than 25 years, and having that deep domain expertise. Frankly, a lot comes to me organically. People just know that I can write checks, and they're going to be contacting me.
Just a follow on. So I'm sure that some of our audience is not sitting in San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Boston, or Philadelphia, right? Where a disproportionate amount of deal flow is. But there are a lot of other really interesting things happening in other areas in our country. Your perspective on that, and do you venture out of, some of the traditional, places to find deals?
Yeah, this is David trying to tackle that issue. You're right. I mean, there are those life science hubs, if you will, from Boston, Cambridge, New York, New Jersey, out to the Bay Area and all the way to LA, Orange County, San Diego. But you're right, there's some other burgeoning ecosystems which are popping up. Certainly Seattle, Denver, Austin, Texas is another hot one, RTP, Durham RTP. And so I think just trying to be open and relevant to what is going on, and then also even going on the other side of the pond. I'm not doing a lot in Asia Pacific right now. I'm still trying to figure that out, but certainly within Europe. But I think you just need to have your finger on the pulse. There's a lot of other great areas popping up that are affiliated with medical and academic centers of excellence that you just need to always be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, thank you. John, help us kind of understand delivery systems.
Sure.
An incredibly potent area that hasn't been overlooked, but there's just not as much going on there. But
Yeah.
you know, you've proven a lot of us wrong. So what's going on?
So the issue is driven by managing side effects. So we're looking at drugs that are known on target for certain cancers, but they carry a host of side effects that are very troubling. And so our goal is to provide drug on target without systemic dosing. And so to that end, we've developed a polymer matrix and implant systems that allow us to implant these little passive drug delivery systems right into the tumor. And so the focus for us initially is prostate cancer. And so we're putting in a series of implants that run for 2 years and will obviate the need for men to take systemic anti-androgen therapy, which is a huge benefit. So the goal is to put the cancer into remission without systemic side effects. And then for those men that have higher risk disease, use our implant in conjunction with external beam radiation therapy and avoid prostatectomy and some of the other more difficult procedures. So drug delivery and in ophthalmology, it's about getting drug directly into the eye, right? So Foresight Vision 5 was focused on eluting drug into the tear film to manage glaucoma, but there's a whole series of now implants that go to the back of the eye and the front of the eye for delivering drugs to manage wet AMD and other diabetic retinopathy, other diseases of the retina, where you normally would have to get monthly injections into the eye. So the idea is to drop off a depot and deliver a sustained dose over many, many months. So again, it's about reducing the burden to the patient. It's about reducing the side effect profile and creating a better quality of life while you're incorporating drugs that are known to be effective.
Thank you. Karl, let's talk about mitigating risk. What have you found to be really effective here, particularly from a family office's point of view?
Yeah, so that's why I get involved with companies early, but I don't like to invest until it's the Series A. And part of that is risk mitigation. I've been a venture capitalist for a long time, and I've actually seen companies helped by venture capitalists, but I've seen them absolutely destroyed by boards consisting of people that I respected, and I don't know, it just didn't gel together. So, and that also gets to the whole thing of running out of money, and so if the investors, I'd rather own a smaller amount and put less money in and have smart people, smarter than me, around the table. And because if you do something really significant with the Series A, raising the Series B, the Series C, it's like if you don't want to take your pro rata, nobody's going to care. I mean, they're like going to love it. And the other thing is, the only way we create value, I mean, if we sell it all to a pharma once, you're only looking for one customer. But they've got I worked at Roche and Genentech. They've got fantastic scientists. They're not going to in-license something unless it's way better. So everything's about the quality of the innovation. And are you doing something really challenging, really hard? Because if you do something simple like the low-hanging fruit, who cares? It's low-hanging fruit. It's everywhere.
So I want to also pick up on something that you said almost in passing several minutes ago, which is that you've actually been able to reap benefit from your investments quicker than many of us traditionally think. I mean, I think what's in a lot of our minds is, gosh, I've got to discover this early and I've got to sit with it through a lot of clinical proof and pray and a variety of things. And you're basically saying that these time horizons, can be much more manageable. So help us understand some reasonable assumptions, ranges around time horizons.
Yeah, so it used to be we would get together a dozen smart people with $10 million and they would figure it out. And we don't have to do that anymore. But if you think everything's going to take 10 years and $1 billion, why not do it that way? Let's get going. So even before the money goes in, I like to have a plan where as pharma's out there cherry picking, you actually you're going to produce something that's a cherry, right? And there's a lot of work that doesn't require any money. And once you spend investment money, it's dilutive forever. And you've also, if you hit a wall with something that's not an important enough problem to motivate pharma, you've directed the whole, I mean, you've ruined people's careers by doing that. So, but importantly, so I want the optionality to have done something important enough I always say 18 months. I just made that up. I mean, a year is not long enough, and we think in years and we have birthdays, but 18 months, you can do, teams can do tremendous things. So I use that as a metric, but a company that I'm an investor in now, we thought the original budget to get to that optionality point would be 10 million, and now we've spent 30 million, and now we've cracked the problem, and it's taken 30 months. I don't care. So you have to have the staying power. It's the process. It's the process of, oh boy, I want to swing for the fence. Well, you're not even on the ball field. You're facing the wrong way. and it's and how does that happen? It's so easy for someone out of an academic group to say, oh, this technology is so great. It can apply to everything. I don't want to limit it. And it's like, no, unless you hone in on one thing, you won't be able to reinvent it. And you don't want to validate the technology doing the least valuable thing.
Thank you. David, let's hone in on the cherries. What are some of those cherries that your very practiced eye is kind of saying, let's take a look under the covers here?
Great question. I invest in the following manner. I invest in people, technology, and IP, and in that order. And I've learned some very hard lessons. If I only had technology and IP, that I would have a winner. First and foremost, people invest in people. And I truly believe that, and I haven't changed that since that first mistake. And so I think if you do the proper diligence, you have the patience, you have the discipline, if you invest in that order, you're going to find those cherries. And I think the diligence is and getting people involved to help you with that diligence is very important, as well as just serving as a mentor to these management teams and to these people, and mentoring them along the way. I think I haven't been involved in a company that if I had good people and their technology was so, they had good IP, but that's the type of people you'll see be recycled onto other companies. And so first and foremost, people, then technology, and then IP.
Yeah. Yeah, John, you're shaking your head. It sounds like your experience.
Yeah. So I'd say, where to find the cherry. So where are those big unmet needs? Oncology certainly is huge. And what we're doing is pioneering what I would call interventional oncology, where we're doing things that are very targeted and very specific for very large groups of patients. But, congestive heart failure, cardiac rhythm management still has large unmet needs. And diabetes, and these are major unmet needs with lots of patients. And so targeting in those spaces with a very innovative idea and a group, as David mentioned, that is persistent, agile, and smart, I mean, you'll make some good progress. Yeah. And from my perspective, what I'm aiming for is to get the attention of a pharma company to want to acquire us after a phase 2 study. And that's typically when a pharma company wants to jump in. If you've demonstrated phase 2 data, they'll want to take it from there. And to that end, we've already got a partnership working with J&J. They saw 6 patients in our feasibility study. They wanted in. So that's going to emerge to be, I think, a nice outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, and just stay with that terrific insight. So over the course of the last 15 or so years, that interest from pharma companies has become, earlier stage. I think I may be wrong here, but I think that's, and you could see it. I mean, you could see it in IPOs, finance, funds being raised, right, at earlier stages and so forth. So, do you see that? Do you see that continuing? Will the farmers have to stay competitive, kind of smell out the best stuff earlier than even phase two, or what?
Well, I think you're right, Jay. I mean, look at how huge those franchises are. I mean, Johnson & Johnson has, what, a $60 billion engine to fuel, right? And so they're not going to be looking for small indications. They're looking for big solutions to big problems. Similarly with Pfizer and Bayer and all of those guys, they need to make investments that'll move their needle. So that's why my instinct is, focus on those big opportunities.
Yeah.
But they are getting in earlier.
Yeah. Thank you, Karl. And help us, you're very focused in synthetic biology. So help us understand what's in, what's out in that area, and where some of the cherry are likely to reside.
Yeah, synthetic biology is harder because it's going to be increasingly more important. AI is going to change how we interact with the world. Synthetic biology is going to bioengineer the world that we interact with. So we already see this with like Impossible Foods, which unfortunately I didn't invest in. But they have they actually have an engineered plant hemoglobin expressed in a fungi, a yeast, which is put in there, and that makes it red and juicy. And there's all sorts. I mean, every single, just on food, there's every single variant you can think of. And I've been looking at all these companies for a long time, and it's harder because part of it is a marketing thing. Like, how did I know that Pat Brown, one of the best scientists that's ever lived, would be a brilliant marketer? Well, I knew he grew up vegan. I knew that he's been thinking about this for a long time. He's wanted to convert us over to plant food. So it turns out he had a brilliant marketing strategy. So they're different things. Or in synthetic biology, Christina Smokey, I did invest in her company. She's been brilliant, not only at the technical roadmap. She ran a very great lab at Stanford, but she's been great not only at the technical roadmap, but in putting in place the business development deals that change the curve and make it a much better investment. I should have put in more money. I didn't know she'd be that good at it. So it's part of it is we're all learning from each other and reinventing the future. And some of the areas are more on the horizon, or some areas like gene editing. There's all these new technologies. It's not only what are the advantages of the gene technology, but you don't want to go after. There's certain diseases where there's already 20 things. Like in oncology, there's like so many PD-1, or it's like you don't want to be you wouldn't start now making an antibody against COVID, right? GSK and Vir cracked it. There were 100 programs. No matter what comes up, there's something that's already been developed that's pretty far along. This is the hard thing. This is why sometimes I'll go after white space, because if there's nothing there, and and people say, yeah, that's important if you can do it, it's a lot easier. So some of the areas, they kind of get crowded, and a new technology become very cool, but it's adjacent to other things. And is it distinguished enough or better enough?
Thank you. And thank you for your humility. Continuing on the humility side, David, when we were talking, you were sharing, hey, I've made some mistakes and I've learned from them. Do you mind opening the kimono up a little bit and just talking about, what mistake to avoid in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I made a reference earlier on about, having technology and IP, but basically a inexperienced, management team where I didn't invest in them. I didn't spend time advising and mentoring. So you can, cross that name out of that company and put your own in, and you can go, oh yeah, I get it. So that's why I've learned people, technology, IP. The other one is don't be afraid to get to, say no and get to a no sooner rather than later, because it can get very, very expensive. I recall walking away at the 11th hour, have a signed term sheet, have docs all sign, and a red flag was uncovered in further legal and technical diligence. And frankly, don't be afraid to walk away, because that'll come back to bite you in the butt if you just allow it to go. And if you start seeing insiders walking away from a subsequent round, there's something wrong. And so that was one of my experiences.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I wanna open this up to questions, and you know, as people are kind of thinking about some of what this might have stimulated. You know, I want to, John, anything to share on potholes that you've stepped in and you don't want others, like family offices, to follow you through?
Well, I think that, you know, David makes a very good point. And I think, you know, continuing to support a company that's clearly in zombie land can be very expensive. Cut your losses, right? So, you know, invest very carefully and don't be afraid to cut it off when they're not making progress, when it's stalled out. On the other hand, give the company plenty of support and room to create an exit for you, right? That's really important. On the intellectual property side, you know, be careful in partnering with large companies, right? You have to protect your IP and make sure that it doesn't inadvertently slip away in a partnership deal. And I've seen that happen on a couple occasions.
Yeah, and what are some of the thoughts on how to protect the IP?
Well, I think when you enter into a partnership agreement with a large company, you got to make sure that you own the work product, right? That it's not theirs, that you own the fundamental enabling technology, and anything that you build upon, you still own, right? So that there's still an incentive for them to want to acquire the company. Otherwise, they've found a free lunch. And we've seen that happen a couple of times. I don't know about Karl and David, if you guys have run into that. But I think
Karl?
that, yeah.
Please, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
I
don't
think
want
that
to
the
interrupt
large
you.
companies are getting savvy, and they know that if they develop a reputation for trying to rip off the startup companies, that they won't get much deal flow, right? They'll get shut out.
Yeah. Karl, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, in the therapeutics, none of the big companies are trying to rip you off or do, they're not even doing competitive intelligence through these potential acquisitions. And in fact, a lot of the long-term partnerships or acquisitions are not coming out as bidding wars. They're like, one company becomes really interested, you get to know each other really well, and then the deal goes forward. So it's not a transactional thing. It's much more. And if you want, the last thing you want to do is pollute your own IP, or do something that screws up the IP of something that you might want.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that from the entrepreneur side comes, they're asking a lot of hard questions, and it needs to be better than their own stuff. And some of the questions they're asking is because they've looked at this area, they have deep insights. You want to learn from those questions. You don't want to get paranoid, and you can answer them without giving away your secret sauce.
Yeah, thank you. Marty, I'm going to ask if you have any questions. You have been quiet. I take that as a sign that you know, you've been pleased with
He's taking notes.
the interaction and taking some notes. Hopefully, that's good.
Yeah, hi Jay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Great. So my questions are, what's the impact of COVID on regulatory? Do you expect that to continue? And you know, there's been some elements of fraud in some of the telemedicine and things like that. You know, do you expect there to be some pushback as a result of that, or backlash? So you know, so you know, COVID's happened. You're talking about the speed of medicine has increased greatly. So you know, do you think somebody's going to put some guardrails on it, or it's just going to keep on, you know, flying? So.
Yeah. David, thoughts on that again?
I'm not seeing a big impact on regulatory. Certainly they're having to prioritize at the agency. and also in Europe as well as Asia on what they're trying to do here. You know, they're putting obviously certain things in priority versus maybe going after something that's on an elective basis, whether that's elective surgery or elective therapeutic options. But I'm not really seeing too much impact on the regulatory side. Certainly, there's going to be maybe a little bit of time, extra time that they're going to be needing for whether that's IND review or NDA or BLA reviews, but not a tremendous impact. I think they're doing a remarkable job, you know, in the regulatory agencies. I think we're still trying to figure this out, Marty, and so guardrails will always be an option.
Yeah.
I don't think we've quite figured it out. What I'm at least hopeful that I do feel that where we are today with the Omicron is that it will eventually go into an endemic. It'll go from pandemic to endemic, and we're going to basically learn to live with this thing. So,
Yep.
This isn't exactly what Marty was asking, but you know, I think that I mean, this has been horrible for everyone, usually challenging. And at the academic level, even being able to get reagents and supplies, groups, labs in England are like, we can't get pipette tips. Can you run this experiment for us? And I think that the whole industry has been nothing short at the scientist level of heroic. They've been able to do things under bad conditions and be incredibly productive. So, you know, just to paraphrase Hamilton, scientists, we got the job done. It's just, I can't, and at big companies too, like Pfizer's small molecule drug that they designed, it's beautiful. It's amazing. And they did it really fast. So it's both the big companies, the small companies, the academics really stepped up. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, again, I haven't seen an impact on the regulatory speed. That's really remarkable. All of our filings are electronic, and the FDA and the other ethics committees are able to digest them pretty quickly. Supply chain is an issue, continues to be an issue. Just getting the gear you need to run a clinical study has been problematic and has caused, you know, weeks, if not months of delay. Marty asked about fraud, and I think that's highly unusual. I mean, the poster child is this whole Theranos thing that we've seen play out in the press. And I guess one of the takeaways there is that she had nobody with healthcare experience on her board.
mm-hmm.
And so that needs to be a red flag, right? Like, where are those guys that know about this stuff to help guide the company? And so that should have scared investors early. But we know some very shrewd investors that got into that deal.
Yeah. Thank you. I want the other panel is beginning to tee up, and I just want to thank each of you for all of the hard and valuable work. I know I'm going to benefit from it, or somebody I care about is in some way. And thank you so very, very much.
Great. Jay, thanks so much for including me, and Karl and David. I really enjoyed your insights. Terrific.
Likewise.